What's up, guys? The MMA Junkie Twitter mailbag is back. It is Friday, December 4th. I'm here to answer your questions once again. Not in Mohegan Sun, but here in Massachusetts. Taking a little break from the fight sphere, which is nice, but I'll be back there next week to answer more of your questions. Really appreciate everybody sending them in. Let's kick things off. First question comes from a mailbag favorite. Johnny Cotton at Dude Jr. asks, outside of the obvious names in Burns, Figueiredo, Chimaev in the Fighter of the Year discussion, who are some under-the-radar candidates in your opinion? Every year I love going through and finding some of those under-the-radar guys that had really good years but nobody's talking about. Sure, they might not be big names. They're not going to win the category, but they're ones that we should definitely give a pat on the back to, because I think it's hard for guys to string together 2-3 wins in a row, never mind do it in a calendar year. But with this year, it's a lot more difficult because I think there's a lot of fighters that weren't able to get in maybe as many fights as they wanted this year. It just seems like the crop is a lot shorter for trying to find guys that even had 2 wins or 2 fights this year. So some names that popped up: Merab Dvalishvili had 3 wins. I think that he's clearly rolling. Maybe it's not against the highest level of opponents, that the guys that he's looking to fight. He had a great year. Obviously, Kevin Holland has to be right there. He's got a fight coming up against Jacare Souza. If he wins that, he's going to be right up there. You know, he doesn't have a belt. He's maybe not as big of a name as Chimaev, but he's certainly done an excellent job of putting himself in a great position this year to be talked about. Another guy, Billy Quarantillo, kind of got screwed. He made his UFC debut in December of last year, 2019. And this year, he has the opportunity to go 3-0, to be one of the few fighters on the roster to do that. So in a 12-month span, he will have gone 4-0, which is pretty impressive. It's just that the calendar cutoff is the issue. So sure, there's a lot of fighters I think that are flying under the radar. Those are a few that come to mind. But like you said, Chimaev, Figueiredo, Gilbert Burns, you can throw in that discussion too for Fighter of the Year. Izzy, he had 2 wins this year as a title holder. So we'll see how this last month plays out. Second question comes from Sam Coakley, who asks, who do you think wins in the Holloway-Kattar bout, and should the winner get a title shot? The fight itself is really difficult. I'll have to go watch some tape because I think they're both so technically sound. This is really the fight to make. I mean, I don't think anybody could look at this fight and say, it's Calvin Kattar and Max Holloway. I think that you have to be excited. If you're an MMA fan, 10% of you is an MMA fan, or you're a casual even, and you know anything about either of these two guys, you have to be excited about it. So, and that's rooted in the fact that they have such solid abilities. I mean, Kattar's boxing is phenomenal. His jab is unlike any we've ever seen. Max's output, his cardio, well-roundedness, experience, championship mentality, ability to kind of put himself, he lost his belt, fights Volkanovski again, and looks just as good, if not better, than the first time he lost, which was controversial in some people's eyes. So I think it's going to be a great fight. Off the bat, just in my initial thought, I'm leaning a little towards Max, but that's not because Calvin Kattar can't get it done. It's just, for me, I'm more used to seeing Max in those big slot opportunities, so I know he's a proven commodity. Calvin's only had 2 main events. He's gone 1-1. Granted, the loss that he had was a 3-round fight that got bumped up against Zabit, and he was changing in his favor. But if you put a gun to my head, I have to say Max Holloway. And then in terms of what's on the line in this fight, has to be a number 1 contender, especially with the news that came out this week that Yair Rodriguez is suspended for 6 months due to whereabouts failures with the USADA program. And then you have Korean Zombie coming off a loss. Ortega's going to get the next fight. Zabit is the only other guy there. And to me, he got a fight, man. He was not in a clear-cut number 1 contender spot. He elected not to fight. There have been guys that have been active. If Calvin goes out and beat Max, sure, Zabit has the win over Calvin, but Calvin strung together solid win after solid win after solid win, and you got to stay active. This game's what have you done for me lately? So number 1 contender fight. I'm leaning towards Max, but I may change my mind before the fight. Stay tuned. Third and final question comes from Twitter user Raf for Life. What do you think happens if Khamzat beats Edwards? Do you think other highly ranked welterweights will actually step up and face the Wolf? There was an issue when Chimaev, I think it's well documented at this point, there was an issue when Chimaev was trying to get his last fight, really struggling to get fights. The UFC wanted to turn him around quickly, have him kind of their new rising star be fighting as quickly as possible, and they had to delay it a few months. He had some visa issues, but then there was that struggle where he could not get fights. And I think, it led a lot of fans to believe, oh, these guys are running, they're afraid of this guy. You saw the criticism with Leon Edwards, which was ridiculous. People just bashing him, saying that he didn't want to fight or he was afraid, and eventually he kind of got pressured into taking it. But that's not out of fear, and we've talked about this before, I think, on the mailbag. Michael Chiesa laid it out perfectly over on Fight Island in one of his scrums, where the guys at the top of that division didn't see any reward from an opportunity like this. Sure, you get to be the guy that derailed the hype train, but you kind of end up exactly where you were. Like, people aren't going to think that you should get a title shot because you beat a guy that's unranked, because it's super easy to come back and discredit a win over a guy like Chimaev before he defeats somebody of Leon Edwards' caliber. And I'm not saying that's going to happen necessarily, but if he does, I think you're going to see more willingness from guys at the top to say, hey, this guy could get a title shot if he gets one more win, and I can be the guy to step in front of him and silence everyone. It'll be a major fight, but it'll also have major implications. And so the risk and reward will be equal. And I think a lot of guys are going to step up, and you won't necessarily see Chimaev having that struggle to find guys to sign the contract against him. All right, guys, that does it for another edition of the MMA Junkie Twitter mailbag. I appreciate everyone's questions. I'll be asking you for more next week. So if you were kind enough to send in a question this week, feel free to send in another one. If you didn't send in a question this week, still welcoming your questions with open arms. So I hope to hear from all you guys soon, and keep them coming.